Right now in the studios, we have Ted Topouzis with Topouzis Associates. And Ted's,
hey, Amelia.
Hey, man. And Ted's talking about selling real estate, the ins and outs, and the stuff you really need to know from the legal end of it. So,
that's right. That's
Ted,
right,
without further ado, my friend.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As a seller of real estate, you have a lot of things in your mind. I mean, you're worried about the value that you're getting for your property, the closing costs, the title,
the moving,
the repairs potentially. I mean,
which agent to hire?
Yeah, which agent to hire? Exactly. That's why you need a good real estate professional by your side. You need the right listing agent like Emilio. You need a closing attorney.
Thank you.
And I'll tell you in a few seconds why you would need that type of thing. There's a lot of things that can step in the way of a real estate transaction that you think will be smooth, and it could turn sideways. So one of the I have several points that I wanted to make and touch on, and one of the things is the purchase and sales agreement. That is a contract for sale, and then there's obligations that are associated with it. And as a seller of real property, you're obligated to sell the property at a certain price and compliance with the contractual obligations that are in that agreement. One of those obligations is the buyer's right to inspect the property. Okay,
mm-hmm.
they have a certain time frame, that's set forth in the agreement where they would get a licensed contractor in and inspector and inspect the property for mechanicals, appliances, roof, windows, electrical. And maybe some visible plumbing and potentially.
It's a fun time,
termites.
Needless to say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No question. That's always a scary situation. Okay,
yes.
What's going to come up with from this inspection? And I bring this up because when the inspection is done, sometimes you find that the property is in great shape. The buyer moves on with what they need to do in the process of purchasing the property, and you can wipe the sweat off your brow. But then other times the condition of the property is not as as pristine, and you might need some repairs. You might need there might be a request for simple repairs to be made, no monetary contribution. Maybe there might be a request for a credit, where
see it often.
You might you might get you might see a couple $1,000s towards the repairs that the buyer's inspector would want to be done, or it could go as far as possibly canceling the transaction if the property is in really bad shape. So the inspections are really an important thing, and it's an obligation that's set forth in the contract. You can't blow it off as a seller. It's important to I would suggest, and I'm sure Emilio does as well with his clients. You might want to. I mean, there's no hard fast rule on something like this, but you might want to do an inspection before you put the property on the market.
Pre-list home inspection.
Pre-list.
Oh,
yep.
Yeah. And I'm just going to jump in right there. I've had so many sellers actually save thousands upon thousands of dollars doing this.
Doing that.
Because what happens if the inspector goes in and finds like a little bit of mold in the sheathing in the attic, right? That's nothing. It's a tiny thing, and it happens all the time in New England.
Sure.
We go in, we send Lynch's Cleaning Restoration, ServPro, whoever it is, go in there, they clean it right up, and now it's gone. Now you have no mold in the house.
Yep, no contribution to...
it's a scary word, that M word.
Right. No negotiations, no worries about the inspection after that. So, yeah, it's definitely advice that you need to take heed of. Another point that I think is important as a seller is you as a seller are contracted to provide clear title to the buyer. Mm-hmm. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, well, the buyer is going to run their title search. Their attorney is going to run their search. They're going to make sure that the property is being sold without liens, judgments, encumbrances. This is important because the buyer's attorney is going to be issuing a title policy, that policy can't be issued if there's there's matters that are picked up in the search, the title search. So what I'm referring to is mortgages, obviously, but water and sewer bills. If there's judgments, if there's tax liens, outstanding taxes, these are some of the few and potentially many things that could be picked up in the course of doing a closing. So all these things need to be paid up, resolved before you can meet up at the closing table and sign your deed, your seller's docs to sell your home. Hiring a closing attorney can give you assistance with that. We look into these things. We make sure that on your side of this process that you are protected. If there's any items that need to be negotiated or need to be resolved, we're there for you to make sure that this kind of thing works out in your favor. That's important. If you decide to go with the buyer's choice in closing attorney, they're hired by the buyer or the buyer's agent, and they may not have your interest in mind. So that's why I bring that up, and I think it's an important thing for a seller to consider. Yeah. Another thing I think that I can spend a couple seconds on is when you're an out-of-state seller, okay, and lots of times people have already relocated and now they're selling their property back home. And
happens a lot.
Okay, right, of course, no question. So you need to have, again, a great real estate agent on your side, because they're acting as your liaison in your place, taking care of the things that you would ordinarily had to take care of when you were living here, but not being here anymore, you need somebody that's going to do these things because a sale can go sideways pretty quickly if you don't have the right people by your side. And one of those things I bring up is as a real estate attorney, you're representing your needs. We'd be preparing your deed, your other closing documents associated with the sale of your property, but also to potentially prepare a power of attorney, which will designate somebody that you can trust, a friend or relative, to stand in your shoes at closing and to sign documents that, in addition to the ones that you've already executed, that would be brought up at a closing by the buyer's side of things. Okay, so these are important considerations that you can't just figure that it's going to work out in the mix. You want it to work out in your favor, not necessarily take it the chance.
Yeah.
Very quickly, there's also as out of state in the state of Rhode Island, we have once you're a resident of another state, there's a withhold tax that would come into play. So that's another thing that's
6%.
Yep, that's right. So of your net sales proceeds, so you have to be mindful of that. That's definitely a large figure. If and we can whittle that down, assuming that you have some expenses that you've incurred during your ownership. So that's an important thing. One last thing I wanted to just quickly mention is death of a joint tenant. That's if you know that you're on title with let's say your husband and wife, and your husband or your wife, your spouse, passed away, and now you're selling the property. You got to let your agent know. The agent's got to, or let your closing attorney know. We need to know these things going into the process because there's some curative work that we need to do to clear what's called an automatic inheritance lien that gets put onto your property. It's not a difficult process to resolve, but we don't want to find out about these things the day or two before the closing because there's documentation that needs to be filed with the Division of Taxation, and it does take the Division of Taxation some time to address that and then record the discharge. So, in short, it's a great time when you're moving on to potentially upsizing or downsizing or relocating. But you need a good real estate attorney by your side, and definitely, no question, you need a good real estate agent to handle your things. You don't want to leave these things to just chance.
No way. Yeah, it's a big process, big transition in your life. You need the right, obviously the right professionals by you.
Right team. That's right.
Definitely.